Hello, everyone. All right, we are at the top of the hour and we have a heck of a lot of content to get through. So we're going to be diving right into it. Hey, Paul. Hey, Brian. Good to see you both.
You
Good
too,
afternoon,
LC.
everyone. Yeah. On behalf of the entire ProShop team and our friends at Cherry Bekaert, thank you for joining us today. I know you're probably a few of you are just logging on. Get yourselves comfortable. My name is Laura Kirk. I go by LC, and I'm going to be your host for today's webinar. We've built this specifically for the machine shops really in the trenches with CMMC, those doing high precision work who need real practical answers on level two and the shared responsibilities around it. We have 60 minutes together, and our goal is to make every one of them count, which is why we are starting at the top of the hour. And our aim is for each of you to walk away with a clear understanding of who contributes to what and what next steps you need to take. Now, before we get into the heavy lifting, I do want to see who's in the room with us today. So, for those of you who don't know, I'm dialing in right from downtown Toronto, where the coffee in my mug is hot, and the weather outside is actually looking fairly reasonable as well. We are finally getting the signs of spring, which is wonderful. It's going up to 59 degrees today, which is very exciting.
Balmy.
Yeah, it's right. Yeah, I'm sure there's people outside in like shorts and a t-shirt. But since this is a webinar series and we have so many of our customers here, we love seeing the reach of our ProShop community. Drop a note in the chat. Let us know where you're joining from. All right, New Mexico, that's amazing.
Make sure you're chatting to everyone instead of just hosts and panelists.
Oh yes, excellent call out. Yeah, make sure that you are signaling it to everyone. Who am I seeing? Raleigh, North Carolina, Northeast. Oh, there we go. Auckland, New Zealand. Welcome, Morgan. That's
Wow.
amazing. Rochester, New York. We are global today, team. That is amazing. So just a few logistics to keep us on track as those locations are popping up. As you can probably already tell, this session is being recorded. There is a lot of technical detail that we're going to be going into today. So don't worry about scribbling everything down. We're recording it and you'll receive the full replay in your inbox within 24 hours. And it'll also go up on the ProShop YouTube channel. So another place for you to find it longer term. Friendly reminder and ask questions, please put them in the Q&A box. That's how we're going to be sequencing Q&A during the webinar and also in the actual dedicated Q&A section. Certainly, Paul, Brian, and I do not want this to be a monologue, so please use that Q&A bubble at the bottom of your screens as we go, and we'll be doing our best to answer along the way and tackling as much as we can at the end in the proper Q&A portion of the presentation. And as it's already obvious, chat is open. Make sure that you are sending it to everyone, though hosts and panelists, that's how you can talk directly to the three of us. Introduce yourself. Like I said, tell us where you're joining from, react to things as we go, and let's have a little bit fun over the next hour together.
We already have a fun question. Can you please give the temperature in Canadian? So what does
Yes,
59 Fahrenheit equal?
15 degrees
15.
Canadian Celsius.
Still
Yeah,
balmy.
still balmy. I am actively trying to memorize the conversion so I can be able to speak to both Celsius and Fahrenheit. And maybe I'll aim to have that done for the next webinar.
All right.
So
I still haven't either, so
there you
but
go,
good
right?
on you for trying.
Thank you, Paul. No, but we had to bring this band back together after the incredible response we had to the CMMC webinar we did back in February, which is also housed in the YouTube channel for ProShop if you happen to miss it. Quick reminder of who's presenting today. So first up, we have Paul Van Meter, who spent 17 years running a machine shop before co-founding ProShop. And, I will say anecdotally, I don't look at that as just a fun fact. I think that's why ProShop is different than other ERP vendors in this space. We are truly built by machinists for machinists, and that is certainly a core part of our culture and DNA in 2026. Joining him and me is my Kirk buddy, Brian from Cherry Bekaert. So Brian is a certified C3PAO, which is a fancy way of saying he's the actual auditor on the other side of the table when it comes to CMMC. So listen closely. He's giving even more insights than last time in terms of roles and responsibilities, some best practices you can be bringing to your own C3PAO relationships. I'm excited to have his section light up for you guys. And finally, my name is Laura Kirk. I go by LC professionally. I'm your Senior Director of Product Marketing. I've been in seat for about 3 weeks, 3 months actually. I'm just about to hit that milestone, which is pretty exciting. And my job is to keep us on track today. So with that, here's the agenda. We've broken down this webinar into 5 core sections followed by Q&A. We're going to start with me giving a very high-speed recap of the compliance landscape just to level set on where the CMMC final rule stands as of today. And then from there, we're going to be moving really into the heart of this session, which is shared responsibility. We touched on this briefly in the last webinar, but based on the questions and the ongoing conversations we had, we realized that we needed to go much deeper, which is what we're doing today. We're not just talking about the concept of sharing the load. We're really going to be showing you exactly what ProShop would be owning as your cloud ERP, what auditors are responsible for, and perhaps most importantly, what those auditors are actually checking for when they're assessing your shop. And then we're going to close with Paul giving us some good practical next steps that you can run with, and then we'll be diving right into the Q&A. But certainly don't be shy. If you have questions that come up, put them in the Q&A bubble, and we'll make sure to get to them either during the webinar or within that section. Alrighty, so before jumping into the quick overview of the compliance section, we do have a quick poll for you, just to get a quick pulse on where this group stands as of today. So it should appear on your screen if it hasn't already. Go ahead and cast your vote. It'll really help us tailor the depth of the technical deep dives we want to do today, just to see where the majority of folks sit in the room. So we'll give folks a couple seconds to do that.
I hope we don't have a lot of not yets. I hope that's moving more down the list. That would be good for the shops out there.
Definitely. It's like every time we do this, it's like that one should be less and less and less. All in. Nice,
Right.
Mark. Okay. Yeah. Definitely seeing done some more research, working with an RPO or a consultant. A couple folks are already in assessment. That's really cool to see. Kudos to those folks. And with that, okay, compliance landscape. So to understand where we are, we need to know the why of why we're here and when each phase and level related to CMMC is rolling out. So more is just a bit of a quick reminder. We've all seen the headlines for years. We've seen that Chinese state-sponsored hackers have been systematically exfiltrating data from US defense contractors, stealing blueprints for platforms like the F-35 and the C-17. But here's what really led us to CMMC Level 2 and what the DoD was figuring out. Adversaries weren't just going through the front door. They were finding maybe the unlocking on the sides or the underbelly entrances. Smaller suppliers, maybe with less defended networks, less cybersecurity, sitting on the same sensitive data as those primes. And CMMC, with that in mind, really isn't just bureaucracy. It was the DoD's response to an active, ongoing campaign to hollow out US defense superiority, really one stolen blueprint at a time. And I think it's important to remember this is where we started and why we are where we are today. So if we're thinking about now and where we are, as of November 2025, we are officially in phase 1. CMMC requirements are now appearing in DoD contracts, which means CMMC has really moved from a good idea in theory to proper contract law. So if you handle CUI, your eligibility for new work is really tied to having a current compliant self-assessment on file in SPRS. And phase 2 kicks off this coming November with full implementation locked in for 2028. These have been the dates and the phases and the rollout plans for a little while now. Nothing has changed, but still important for all of us to remember. And certainly, I think it signals that we've moved away from the wait and see era to really the show me era. The silver lining of it all. The other consideration as well is the window for competitive advantage for shops is wide open. Primes like Lockheed and Northrop are scrubbing their supply chains right now. And they aren't just looking for the shops that are fully certified. They're also looking for partners with a clear roadmap or a plan and a current self-assessment on file. You can show up with that, and you're not just a vendor, you're exactly the kind of low risk, audit ready partner primes are desperately looking for right now and are actively looking for and want to work with when it comes to the work that they need to execute. So, lots of moving pieces to this, definitely a little bit stressful, but want to reinforce the opportunity that this also presents to our shops. And finally, just to recap our last session, we did establish three core truths that are going to continue and play out in this presentation. CMMC, it's about execution. You have to prove you're doing the work, not just have the policy in the drawer, let's say. The hero model is broken. You cannot and should not maybe rely on yourself or one IT person to carry out the 110 controls alone. It's truly a recipe for burnout and potentially a failed audit. And compliance with that in mind is a shared stack when it comes to CMMC. It's a team sport between your ERP, your advisors, and your shop floor. And I want to be very clear, ProShop is fully committed to being everyone's teammate in this. We aren't just selling the software and saying, wishing you luck, right? That's not who we are. It's, built by machinists for machinists. And we are invested in this community because we know the strength of the defense supply chain depends on shops like yours staying in the game. And we built out our platform to shoulder as much of those controls as possible. Paul will be walking us through that today. So maybe you can stop being such a compliance hero and go back to being a manufacturing leader. The bottom line, when your system, right, like ProShop enforces the process, the audit proof takes care of itself, which is really powerful. You shouldn't have to stop making parts to do compliance. It should be the natural byproduct of how you run your shop, which is exactly where ProShop comes into play. And now for us to kind of dive a little bit deeper into the shared responsibility matrix, ownership and responsibility across the four key layers, I will be passing it over to the very talented Paul Van Meter.
Thank you, Elsie. Appreciate it. Well, hey, everybody. Good to be here with you again. You all are from lots of different places, including all the way across the other side of the world in New Zealand. I love seeing that. Yeah, so shared responsibility, what does that actually mean? I think it's clear for those, certainly those that are current ProShop clients today and, use ProShop for your QMS compliance. I think that's really easy to kind of to picture and understand, right? When you are running a work order and doing your inspections right inside the system, and we are validating those inspection results, helping you create and track nonconformance reports or spawn a corrective action from that, right? We are providing the tools to just keep all that QMS compliance work fully in the system, right? They're kind of enforcing best practices and sort of walking you through a workflow that is compliant with the AS91 standard, for example. So we're taking a very similar approach in the features and functions that we have now built for the last several years and will continue to build for how we can support CMMC compliance as your shop ultimately needs to go get that audit done. So let's move to the next slide. There's basically four layers to this. The top layer, and I like this sort of responsibility and ways of thinking about it, right? The application layer of ProShop, it's sort of like the vault it's in the bank. If you were on our last call, we talked about how ProShop is kind of the safe deposit box in the bank. You don't need to build the bank. You just need the key to that box that ProShop is building. So that's sort of the application layer. The infrastructure layer, of course, we host all of our cloud clients on AWS. GovCloud, of course, is where most of our clients would exist today if they're in the aerospace or defense world and care about that. Ultimately, of course, we have the new FedRAMP compliant version coming. So that's sort of the building on the walls of that building. And then the organization is you, right? You need to keep track of everything inside. We, of course, we can't be there with you, so those are things you have to do yourself. Things like, physical access to the building, how you vet and control your employees, even how you might store things that are outside of ProShop. So there's that layer, and then of course there's the RPO, your consultant, and then the C3PAO, like Brian and Cherry Bekaert, that might come in and actually provide that assessment to make sure that you have indeed passed all 110 controls. So let's dig into some of those details here. So there are 110 of them, as we know, and we've kind of broken out here into ones that are shared between us, ones that are entirely outside of your need to worry about them too much, and ones that are squarely sort of in your shoulders, in your lane. So 41 of the controls are fully covered between us and AWS, right? So they are things that we have in place that you don't even really need to put any effort or attention into. They are things like the fact that we do backups, the fact that it will be in a FedRAMP environment. That is one of the controls. So we have those things handled, and that is something that you need to have it, in your plan. Your SSP needs to show that these controls are owned by ProShop. And Brian will talk in a little bit of sort of what kind of proof they'll be looking for of that. But those ones are ones you can check off pretty easily. The biggest bucket are ones that are shared, right? We are providing some tools, but it is up to the shop to use those tools well, and make sure they are in compliance with the requirements of those controls. So we'll get into a few of the specifics here. We're not going to go through, all 110 of those today. We will be sharing our new revised shared responsibility matrix in April. So that is something you can look out for. I guess I presume if you're on this webinar, you might get an automatic link to it, but we can ask about that a little bit later. But that is coming out where that'll get more specific. So an example of one that is shared would be ProShop has the ability to support FIPS compliant YubiKeys as a method for doing second factor authentication. But we can't force you to use those, right? It's up to the shop to get those YubiKeys, to configure them properly, to give them to employees to use, and to set the settings inside of ProShop that require the use of them. So that's an example. Password complexity would be another one. ProShop has very precise and configurable password sort of complexity regimes, we call them. And you can set, but it's up to you to set that setting, right? We're not going to force a commercial client to have a password that has 16 characters and all the different special characters and things of that nature. So again, the setting is right there. You can even just choose the CMMC option right in the list, but it is up to the shop to actually configure that for you. And then there's the ones that are completely in your scope, doing training of your employees, of course, physical control of the boundary of your shop. And then there's a few that are sort of inherent, that sort of skip us a little bit and go right between AWS and you. And then there's some footnotes at the bottom there. Like there's a few things like, your wireless access and a few other things that, again, are sort of yours to control and sort of out of scope of anything that ProShop could even help you with at all. All right. There's already a question. What are those other 7 controls? Those will be on the shared responsibility matrix when we publish that in the next few weeks here. Great question. All right. So we're going to launch another poll here. Really want to see with where you're at right now, and I guess it will be somewhat dependent on what you answered on the first poll. So go ahead and launch that, Sarah. Who is currently owning your CMMC compliance, right? For a lot of shops, if they have an IT person, it might be that person. Sometimes I've heard recently, our QMS coordinator or QA manager is kind of responsible for that. That's an awful lot of burden to put on a QA manager, I'd say. Or if it's a very small shop, just the owner is kind of trying to figure it out. Hopefully, you have a more broad approach. And But we're curious to see how that all lands here. Aaron, can you provide a list of controls and their status? Yes, that will be in that shared responsibility matrix. And yeah, so a bunch of those have been in ProShop for quite a long time now. We will announce here in a few minutes a couple of new things that are coming. So in terms of status, and of course, we'll share a little bit more about our FedRAMP journey as well. All right, so yeah, bottom line, this is definitely a shared project, right? It is not entirely on your shoulders by any means. We are really in this, as Elsie said, we are in this to be a partner. We know how critical it is that shops that serve the defense industry stay in it, continue to serve, reap the benefits of, of being one of those preferred suppliers that are going for CMMC compliance. And we just cannot afford to have a bunch of you decide to leave the industry because it's too costly and too complex, right? So we are doing our very best to provide tools and guidance and sort of an ecosystem to help you make it achievable and affordable and go out and win that work and stay in the game with us all. All right. Let's get into a little bit more specifics. What we own, so we don't have to. So the application layer. This is where we kind of have already announced this before, but if we'll go to the next slide, we are officially calling this our Fed Cloud option, right? So there'll be 3 versions of sort of where ProShop will be hosted. There's our commercial cloud for clients that just don't need any of this. There's our normal Gov cloud for clients that might be in sort of a related space but don't need to go for CMMC compliance. And then there'll be the Fed Cloud for those that do. We are targeting this summer to finish our audit to equivalency, and we will keep you up to date on how that progress goes. But it's going well and it's going quickly. All right, let's talk a little bit more specific here about some of these controls. So systems and comms protection. I mentioned FIPS validated encryption. There are ways of having encryption that are not FIPS compliant, and that is an absolute foundational piece for CMMC compliance. So it is definitely worth your while to understand different methods of multi-factor authentication, and how you can also make sure that any encryption that you are needing to do, like if you use BitLocker on your computers, that you're configuring that in a way where it's FIPS compliant. And so 10 of those in that category are fully controlled by us, and 4 of those are shared by you. When it comes to system information and integrity, 24/7 threat protection, vulnerability scanning, those all are handled by us. And one is shared by you, but that threat protection, we are going to be having that in place in our Fed Cloud environment, right? So that would be an extremely enormous task for a shop to actually try to put that in place. So that's something that ProShop will largely have in place there. With audit and accountability, again, we are covering some of these completely, but a lot more of this is shared with you, right? So this will require you to use the configurations, use the features and functions that ProShop has put into the software to make sure that you are sort of controlling things in a way that is compliant. So, for example, whenever someone logs into ProShop, there's of course a log of that with their authentication, with their YubiKey, with their file access security group that's designated in ProShop Safe Plus, and then every time they go to a file, to a record, pull up a drawing, there's going to be logs of all of those things, which are required for compliance. So those are just some of the things that we'll be putting in place to have that section provide some great infrastructure. But again, there's still a lot that you need to kind of make sure you are enforcing on your side with policy. And then I guess let's do the last one before we move to the next slide there. Identification, authentication, right? I don't know exactly what replay resistant means. Maybe Brian can tell us that when we get to his section. But yeah, this is where the YubiKey and MFA is just going to really fall into place. Um, and again, we've had those tools in ProShop for, I don't know, 3 or 4 years probably at this time. So, and we have many clients that have used that for quite a long time. In fact, we were just at Renscott Manufacturing near Boston last week, and all their employees have their little retractable lanyards with their YubiKeys on it, and they are using that to log into all of their systems on a daily basis. So, all right, now let's move along. So yes, when you and I do want to be clear about this. If you are a current ProShop customer and you need to go for CMMC, you will need to move into our Fed Cloud new environment, right? It is not something you will automatically get. You will need to talk to your CSM and get a quote and ask for that move. It will have some cost with it, but that is the environment that we are building for compliance. And the next thing, inherited controls, right? As you saw in those earlier slides, we cover a lot of the controls just with the things we built into ProShop. Like I said before, we are really trying to help reduce the amount of complexity and cost and time it takes for you as a shop to maintain compliance. So that's where those inherited controls come in. And then the proof of what is being done as you operate your business inside this environment, that creates the third-party proof that you can show people like Brian. All right, let's move along to the next one. All right, I'm very excited about this. So this is a new feature. So for those of you familiar, we've had, assuming you're on Safe Plus, we have our classifications module, and that we've had that for probably a year or so now. And that allows you, as you upload documents into ProShop, it will automatically allow you to tag them with certain tags. So CUI could be a type of tag. So let's say you received a drawing from a customer for a defense article and it is labeled as CUI. When you upload that into ProShop, you can tag that file, and that will then create sort of a boundary to show where everything is in ProShop that has that marking. Similarly, because ProShop Safe is browsable, if you just go to your client portal, grab some files and drag them into the customer originals folder, for example, for a part number, ProShop Safe is always monitoring that file system and can pop up and ask you to tag those files, even though you haven't used the ProShop interface to upload them. We think that's a pretty powerful tool. But what's coming next is record classification. So prior we had files. Now coming in the next few updates here, we'll have record classification. So that means that every record within ProShop can be labeled. So if you know that a work order or part number that you are making has a CUI drawing attached to it, and it will have CUI in the form of G code and photos that are attached into the system, or even just the description of how you're controlling that process. Anyone just got an echo? I think it's gone away. All right, it's temporary echo. So you'll be able to tag that part number, and which would get inherited by the work order. You could tag, for example, tasks as having CUI. If you have specific work instructions on how to do, masking of threads on a defense article or something to that nature. So it's going to be a pretty powerful tool to be able to have not only files, but also record classification. It will really help to define where that CUI lives in ProShop, and then also provide that audit trail. And the audit records and the logs of who's accessed what, where the files are, those will be able to be uploaded into a SIEM tool that can be combined with logs from other systems you might use to show the auditor those results. So we're pretty excited about that one. I see there's a ton of questions coming. We will get to those in the Q&A, but let's move to the next slide. Right. So as part of this classification of records and files, and of course, there's the file access security group is related to this as well, if you're a ProShop client today. But what it really is about is allowing the right people to see those essential things and nothing more. It is important for your boundary, for your compliance, that there's a clear distinction of which users have access to see records, to perhaps create records, and which do not. And so, as you can see here in that little table on the image there, we are really trying to enforce sort of the least privilege access concept and mapping direct controls to the AC requirements of the CMMC standard. So we're very excited about this new update coming. It's definitely going to make compliance easier for those customers of ours. All right. So again, just kind of reinforcing the same point here, but we are really trying to do much of the heavy lifting for you. We want to make sure that your CUI never touches a non-compliant environment, right? We, of course, will be hosting in our FedRAMP environment on GovCloud, and we will be assessed by a third party to make sure that that requirement that if you have a cloud service provider hosting CUI, that is a solid green check mark in that box. And again, sort of to the point we've talked about a few times here already, the audit trail kind of writes itself as employees log in, as they open up a drawing, as they work on a work order. ProShop will automatically create that log of which employees have access to CUI to make sure that you can show that no non-authorized person has access to CUI. And that just makes auditing easier. We do plan on also providing the NIST 800-171 standard within our standards module, and then having sort of mapped requirements showing which of those 110 controls are fully owned by us, and sort of an explanation of that, and which ones are shared, and sort of explanations of that. That should help make it clear for our customers and help make it clear for that auditing process. But we really think, kind of like if you, again, are a customer and you've worked with our QMS Flying Start package, this is not all the way to showing you how you're going to meet the controls that are not within ProShop. That is strictly up to your shop to determine that. But ProShop can be the place where you record the evidence or links out to the tools that you are using or the policy that you have created. And you can use our QMS modules directly to build new tasks, to build new training, to build new procedures that talk about how you meet those controls. So it should still structure the audit in a very nice way, just like when you go for that AS9100 audit, and the audit is largely just executed straight out of ProShop itself. So we really, again, do want to make it easy so it's less cumbersome and less onerous for all of you out there. All right, there's a few others here. Let's get into, so here are some specific ones that maybe we'll dive a little bit into. So security and awareness training, right? Making sure your team understands the risks associated with their day-to-day activities. That is a training program that can live right inside of ProShop. Of course, there's role-based. Everyone that uses ProShop knows we have our company positions module, excuse me, I had a brain fart there. Our company positions module, which will allow you to even define within that what roles within the sort of cybersecurity lens people might be responsible for, and you can tie trainings directly to those. Inside threat awareness, your RPO will certainly help you build this. This is not something you probably want to try to build entirely on your own. And then personnel screening, again, that is definitely up to you, but ProShop can be the repository for where you record those records that the auditor will want to check out and see. All right, and I think we're finally on to Brian's section.
All right, excellent. Thanks, Paul.
Yeah, you bet, Brian.
Yeah, thanks, LC. Appreciate you guys inviting me on here again to talk about CMMC. Just a quick background, as LC alluded to at the beginning, I serve as a director at Cherry Bekaert within our information assurance and cybersecurity practice. We are an authorized C3 PAO, and in addition to an RPO. So we support customers and contractors on getting ready for a CMC assessment, and then we also support the certification assessment side. So just kind of on this section here, I want to shift the conversation from what ProShop provides to how an assessor actually evaluates an environment that includes a cloud service provider. So specifically, we're going to talk about or talk through how assessors look at contracts or contractors who are using cloud solutions to store, process, or transmit CUI, and more importantly, how the shared responsibility model plays into that evaluation. One of the biggest misconceptions we see from contractors is their belief that because they're using a cloud service provider, that somehow alleviates their responsibility during the CMC assessment. It does not alleviate your responsibility, but instead it likely would simplify your certification assessment process and focusing on what you as a contractor are responsible for when using that cloud service provider. So by the end of this section, I want you guys to be able to walk away with a clear understanding of how to prepare for an assessment when you're using a cloud service provider or cloud service providers in scope. So what in actually, Elsie, you can stick on the previous slide there, sorry. So before we go further, it's important to level set what a CMC assessment actually is. So a C3PO is not implementing controls. We're not designing your environment. We're not supporting your cloud provider. What we're doing is validating the requirements of NIST from NIST 171 and verifying that they've been implemented across your in-scoped boundary or your in-scoped assets. That means we're evaluating what you've implemented, how it's operating, and whether you can prove that it's been implemented through evidence. So when a cloud provider is involved, it doesn't change the requirement. It changes where those controls are implemented and how they're evaluated. So we can move to the next slide. So here, before we jump further into cloud service providers and FedRAMP requirements, just want to start off from the very beginning and establishing a basic understanding of controlled and classified information. So on the screen here, this is the formal definition of CUI that's provided per the CFR 32 Part 170. And so before we can determine anything about cloud, FedRAMP, or your scope, we have to start with CUI. So CUI is information the government creates or possesses, or that you create on behalf of a government per a government contract that requires safeguarding. It's key that this is a service that you're providing to the government per contract. One important thing to understand around CUI, and this is a huge question mark within the defense industrial base currently, and it's been that way for some time as well, is that information is only CUI if the DoD says it's CUI. It is the government's responsibility, not the contractor's responsibility, to identify what is CUI, and that is done through the contract vehicle. And so it's very important that if you're a contractor, and I'm sure there's many on this call that are asking themselves, hey, we have no idea what information is considered CUI that we're handling. Very valid question, and I would say you're not alone in that. I do, as a C3PO on a webinar, I do want to avoid giving formal recommendations or advice that could be construed as consulting, because as a C3PO, there's conflicts of interest and independence requirements and impartiality, where even on a webinar, if I'm providing consulting or advisory information, that could potentially conflict me out from doing your guys' certification assessment later on down the line. However, I do want to point you in the right direction on where to get information and to kind of point you in the right direction to help those contractors that are struggling with identifying CUI. And so back in June of 2025, there is a CMMC town hall that was hosted by the Cyber AB. During that town hall, they bring in James Gopal. James Gopal is an expert in CUI. He's written numerous guides around handling CUI in the CUI handbook. And during that webinar, he provides advice and recommendations to contractors that may be in your same boat around how to determine if information is CUI, if you receive CUI and you suspect it's not CUI, what to do with it, or vice versa, if you receive information that's not marked CUI and suspected CUI, where to go and what questions to ask to determine if that information is CUI. At the end of the day, ultimately, since this is driven by contracts, it's going to require some input from your legal counsel, and kind of helping you guys to interpret and determine per the contract what is CUI. I'll also just kind of mention that the government is supposed to be providing what are called security classification guides that enumerate the attributes of the information that make it CUI, and they should be providing you with those security classification guides. So a lot of times contractors, if they're suspecting information is CUI, they can reach out to the government and ask for those security classification guides. And we're seeing most of the times when contractors reach out for that information, the DoD is turning around and saying, yeah, okay, no, it's not CUI. So there are some options that you have for, if you're in that boat of, hey, we have no idea what is CUI, there are some options and routes you have. But I would direct you to that June 2025 town hall that has a lot of good recommendations and advice for you to consult. All right. Okay, so now that we've kind of established what is CUI, and hopefully you guys are on the path to determine if you have CUI environment and what CUI information is in your environment. Next, kind of going kind of down the line of decisioning and getting ready for a CMMC assessment is, okay, yeah, we know we have CUI information in the environment. We have cloud service providers that we're using that are, as an organization. Okay, now the next question is, are those cloud service providers in scope? And if they're in scope, do they store, process, transmit CUI information? Now, before we kind of get into that, understanding what is a cloud service provider, CMMC has specific definitions on what a cloud service provider is. And so they refer to the CFR 32 Part 170 rule defines what a cloud service provider is, but they also point to NIST 100-145, which is a NIST document that defines what a cloud service provider is. And that's the definition that CMMC relies upon. So in layman's terms, a cloud service provider is a system that provides on-demand network access to shared computing resources. That's broad, so it's easier. That's a broad definition, but it's easier way to think about it is through the services model that's defined in 801-45. So they break it down into 3 different models: SaaS, PaaS, and IaaS. So SaaS being, for example, your application layer, ProShop ERP being an example of a SaaS provider. PaaS being the platform layer, and some examples there being Azure App Services, AWS Beanstalk, and of course you have the infrastructure layer. And these would be AWS GovCloud, Azure Government, Google GovCloud. So for example, using ProShop ERP, you have 2 cloud service providers in scope. You have ProShop ERP as a SaaS, but then you also have AWS GovCloud as your infrastructure as a service. So keep in mind that, okay, it's not 1 cloud service provider, it's 2 cloud service providers that we need to make sure meet the requirements for FedRAMP, the FedRAMP requirements. So let's talk a little bit about kind of FedRAMP here. So I'll see if you want to jump to the next slide. Great. So once we've kind of, we know that we have some cloud service providers, they fall into this bucket as a SaaS, or they're providing infrastructure using AWS GovCloud. The next question to ask yourself is, okay, does this cloud service provider store, process, or transmit CUI information? And that kind of loops back to first step being identifying CUI, and then the next step, identifying cloud service providers, and then the third step, are we storing, processing, or transmitting CUI information within these cloud service providers? If the answer is yes, then those cloud service providers are required to be FedRAMP moderate or FedRAMP equivalent. And we'll talk about equivalency here later on. Just gathering my notes here. So if it doesn't handle CUI, a key point here, if you're using a cloud service provider and you determine that they don't handle CUI, but they are in scope for your assessment, then FedRAMP doesn't apply, but that cloud service is assessed against the CMMC requirements. So for example, you could be using a cloud service provider to provide, to host your logging tool, your centralized log management tool. Well, that tool is in scope, and that's hosted in a cloud platform. That cloud platform is in scope, but it's not storing, processing, transmitting CUI information. Therefore, FedRAMP requirements don't apply, but it's still in scope for your assessment. just kind of one key caveat there when FedRAMP applies and when it may not apply. Great. So next, I want to talk about differences between FedRAMP Moderate and FedRAMP Moderate equivalency. So we've gone down this path that we determined, yes, we have CUI, and yes, we have CUI in the cloud service provider that then they need to meet the FedRAMP requirements. Back in January 2024, the DoD CIO office released a memo. And that memo clarified what FedRAMP equivalency means, or what the requirements are for FedRAMP Moderate equivalency. That has been a long-standing question going back to DFAR 7012. Equivalency was first defined in DFAR 7012, but there was no supporting guidance around what equivalency actually meant, not until the January 2024 memo came out. The key distinction is FedRAMP Moderate essentially means you're a cloud service provider that you're able to obtain a government ATO and go through the FedRAMP process and be placed on the FedRAMP marketplace. A lot of cloud service providers that are supporting CMMC, they're supporting defense contractors, private contractors in the defense space. FedRAMP Moderate was really meant for providing services to the federal government. So there's this difference here between, hey, we have cloud providers that are providing support to government contractors in the private industry, but they're not providing service to the federal agency, so therefore they're unable to get an ATO. Those cloud service providers are able to go the equivalency route and obtain an assessment through a 3 PAO. Now, for a FedRAMP Moderate, when I'm an assessor, I'm doing an assessment, and there's a cloud service provider that's in scope, and they're storing, processing, transmitting CUI, the first thing I do is I go to the FedRAMP marketplace and I verify if the services that are being provided from that cloud service are on the FedRAMP marketplace, and that cloud provider is noted as either moderate or at a minimum moderate. They could be FedRAMP High, they could be FedRAMP Moderate, each would be fine. And that would be sufficient for my assessment procedures for verifying that a cloud provider is FedRAMP Moderate. I would also, though, as part of those procedures, review their shared responsibility matrix and verify that the shared responsibility matrix applies to the services that are being provided. But that assessment procedure applies to both whether a cloud provider is moderate on the marketplace or if they attain equivalency through a 3 PAO. The additional procedures that an assessor needs to perform when a cloud provider has gone the equivalency route is, and this is laid out in the DoD memo, is there's what's called a body of evidence. So the cloud provider needs to provide to the contractor a body of evidence, and that would essentially include the system security plan, the security assessment plan, the security assessment report, and any plan of actions and milestones. And so that would be what's called a FedRAMP package that will be provided by the cloud service provider to the OSC, and then the OSC provide that package to the C3 PAO during a CMC assessment to evaluate. Additionally, one key caveat between equivalency and moderate is during an equivalency assessment, that cloud service provider has to attain 100% on all requirements, and it cannot have any POAMs upon completion of the equivalency assessment in order to be considered FedRAMP Moderate equivalent, which is a higher bar than just moderate, where you're allowed to have POAMs and work on meeting those POAM items. So just kind of want to draw out that distinction between moderate and equivalency and what an assessor is required to do when they're evaluating FedRAMP compliance for cloud service providers. All right. Next, we kind of talked about this, the shared responsibility matrix. And this is key to an assessor when they're conducting their assessment procedures. So you can see here on the screen, just as kind of a high-level example, we have infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, and SaaS service. And there's different responsibility models. And so you can see when you're using a SaaS service, you're able to inherit a lot more of the requirements from that cloud service provider than you are under the infrastructure as a service model, which makes sense. There's a lot more that you're responsible for, that you need to configure, that you need to manage when you're just using an infrastructure service versus a SaaS service. Now, when we're assessing, one of the initial pieces of evidence we'll request is a shared responsibility matrix, because that informs the procedures that we perform. Going back to what I mentioned earlier, when there's this misconception that because you're using cloud service provider, that means you're not required to be, you're not responsible for any requirements. You are responsible for those requirements that you have a shared responsibility for, or you have a full responsibility for per that shared responsibility matrix. So if that's an assessor, we're going to review that shared responsibility matrix, and we're going to assess your environment based off those shared responsibilities that you have responsibility for. So it's key when you guys are preparing for an assessment, you review that shared responsibility matrix and you verify that your system security plan, one, addresses those requirements that you have responsibility for, but then also you have the assessment artifacts in place to support your assessment for those requirements that you're responsible for. And then final slide here, just kind of recapping what I kind of mentioned there around getting ready for a certification assessment, identifying CUI, confirming if you have a cloud service provider. If you do, okay, do they need to meet FedRAMP requirements? Do they meet the FedRAMP requirements? Are they able to rise with the FedRAMP package? And then going through and updating your system security plan to address those requirements that you're responsible for.
All right. Thank you, Brian. I appreciate it. Great information. I know it's a lot to take in. That's why we're recording it, and you can watch it on slow next time you watch it. Take lots of notes. All right, let's talk about what's next. So we covered this in the last webinar, but here's some quick things. I definitely want to get to the Q&A here. There's a lot of them. Assess your current state, right? You can, Sarah, if you can share this link in the chat. There's a DoD assessment guide that the DoD created and published. So it's a great tool for you to go do that initial assessment. You should definitely start reaching out to an RPO or cybersecurity consultant very soon because they often have backlogs themselves, even before you can get to the backlog of actually getting an audit or an assessment. So, and then next would be reach out to a C3PAO. Cherry Bekaert's information will be on the last slide, so feel free to reach out to them or any others that you might want to. So I just want to take a moment to kind of reflect on what we've covered and just the state of all of this. This is definitely hard work. There's no doubt about, I'm guessing that when you got into the machining business, when you started your business, that this likely wasn't even on the radar. And now it's being flowed down to you and you're like, oh my gosh, one more thing. I understand that. And again, we are trying to do our level best to help you make this leap, make it less expensive, make it more understandable and less cumbersome. And the time window is now. I wouldn't say you're early if you really start now. There are definitely shops that have started earlier than this, but now is the time. Do not wait. You know, it really reinforced for me. I was traveling all of March and went to, I think, 13 different shops, and many of them were like, yeah, I know we need to really start doing this. And these are shops that have a large percentage of their work in the defense industry. And a lot of them are like, yeah, I need to get on that. Please don't be in that spot. Like you got to be proactive here. So I think I'll leave that point there and move on to the next slide. So we have a new resource that will also get dropped into the chat. There it is. Thank you. You can scan it with your phone if you want it on your phone as well. So it's it's a resource hub that we've just recently published. So definitely grab that link, open it, and dig through that later after we're done with this webinar. Speaking of webinars, we have another one. This should be very interesting to all customers and non-customers alike if you're interested in what we have going on. This is going to be both a Q1 review as well as a little bit of a sneak peek and some really cool stuff that's coming in Q2. So that's on April 14th. Please register and check that one out. Again, I can't share too many specifics, but it is super exciting. So
super exciting. And maybe I'll just tease that we might be joined by our friends at Ground Control to share an update. So for anyone who maybe can read between the lines on that, definitely register, and looking forward to seeing everyone on that. And I'm back, which means it's Q&A time. We have so many questions to get through. I think this might just be shooting it out like out of a fire hose, right? Just to start spraying answers left, right, and center to get through as many as we can. So maybe Paul and Brian, the way that I'll do this, I'll start reading them out to you, and you guys can answer as we go.
Sure.
Does that sound good? Okay. So we did get a couple of questions around providing a list of our controls and their status. So Paul, maybe we can just reinforce here that we are publishing our shared responsibility matrix.
Yep, that will come out in the next few weeks with our shared responsibility matrix. So.
Yep. So yeah, I think we have that question from Aaron. Matt, does ProShop Safe Plus users automatically get moved to the Fed Cloud option?
No, definitely not. That is something that you will need to talk to your CSM about, ask for a quote on it, and the Fed Cloud option will automatically have Safe Plus, but Safe Plus does not mean that you're going to get moved to the Fed Cloud. Definitely not. We have some clients that want Safe Plus just because of the resolution it provides them for locking down their files, but they still don't have any need for the FedRAMP environment.
Mhm. Good call out. Do the controls that are owned by ProShop, is that still true for on-prem ProShop installs?
No, largely not. You could still use, YubiKeys, for example, potentially, or password, complexity, but the vast majority of those things will reside with you, not ProShop, if it's not in our cloud. There's just some things we can't even do. Like Safe Plus is not an option on-prem, so you will have to come up with an entirely independent tool for managing file access.
Yes, so definitely echo for all existing customers. Please reach out to your CSM and they are ready to support you in starting those conversations and getting you the answers that you need. All right, we have another one. Can you use a fingerprint scanner for logging in?
Do you know that one, Brian?
Yeah, I want to say it ultimately depends on what you're trying to use the authentication for. I would recommend looking at requirement 3.5.3 within the CMC Level 2 assessment guide, because my question there is, okay, what is the second factor? Multi-factor authentication, while it's not required for local access from non-privileged users, multi-factor authentication is required for network access of privileged and non-privileged, and it's also required for local access from privileged users. So if you're attempting to achieve MFA through that requirement, I don't think just a screen print alone is going to meet that multi-factor requirement unless there's a second factor that you're entering. So I just recommend looking at requirement 3.5.3 and determining if you're meeting those MFA requirements.
Good
Thank you,
answer.
Brian. Yeah, great answer. Will we have a way for customers to submit POs or RFQs with CUI files directly into ProShop so they don't have to hit our network or be sent via some insecure means like email?
Yeah. So, and I saw there's some questions about vendors as well. Without providing too much detail, ProShop does aim to provide a method for moving files in and out of the company in a compliant way. So, yeah, it is very much something that we want to solve for our customers. So you don't have to buy a third-party tool like Box or some other thing and then have that complexity. So the ability to have, clients like place something right into ProShop Safe, or place a drawing that a vendor might go be able to review without downloading it to their network. That is something that we want to solve. So, yes.
All right, on to the next. We receive CUI from customers and then create our own internal DWGS, DWGs. Are these internal still considered CUI? Also, the G code for these parts, are these considered CUI as well? And just for the record, it looks like this came up during your portion of the presentation, Brian.
I'm sorry, I was reading through the other Q&As. I'll see. Can you
No,
repeat that question?
Yeah, basically
don't
derivative
apologize.
CUI. If something is CUI, are the drawings and G code considered that as well?
Yeah, ultimately, I mean, the answer I'm always going to give on this without knowing the full details is it depends. And it really goes back to the contracts where you're providing these services under, because those contracts should be specifying what is CUI data. And so really that conversation goes back to the contracts, and then further conversation, which if your contracts likely don't define what is CUI, okay, then you're going down the route of we need to reach out to contracting officers or to the DoD and try to get information around what attributes or what information is considered CUI per the contract.
Okay. LC, if you don't mind, I'm just going to, and let's maybe go to the final slide with contact info. I'm just going to get a couple of these out of the way. A transition from commercial cloud to FedCloud, that is pretty straightforward. There's not a full system implementation. It's the same system. It's just hosted in a different environment. So Aaron, that should be pretty straightforward from your perspective. Record classifications, definitely part of Safe Plus, not part of regular Safe Core. YubiKeys, I'd say ask Ali, the chatbot, about YubiKeys and engage with our team if you need help. But it should be fairly straightforward once you buy those keys. Yeah, Aaron, interesting question about CUI and transferring from machines. We don't have a DNC function at this point. I know I have been in shops that use sort of encrypted keypad protected thumb drives, and they're using that method. This would really be a question to ask an RPO or a MSSP about how you can connect a machine and share G-code that way. I know machines are considered specialized assets. They don't have some of the strict controls that a regular computer might. So there's definitely stuff to be learned there. Mm-hmm. And I think we will have to wait on the rest of them or somehow answer them via a follow-up email. There's too many to get to today.
There's a lot of good ones, and certainly I think as well on that resource page we have the opportunity to probably publish a FAQ section where we can answer some of these even in a follow-up, and certainly for customers who have asked questions, we'll be reaching out to you directly to get what you need. Reminder that all of our webinars, so if you're interested in any previous sessions, it is on the resource page that Sarah shared out. It is in the YouTube channel. Reach out to your CSMs to talk and get further information around pricing, implementation, all that good stuff. And we'll be getting back to you on all things outstanding questions from the Q&A. But certainly thank you to everyone for attending today. We are a minute over. I think we did pretty good getting this in time with a lot of really important information. And certainly we understand your time is valuable. And I hope we were able to give some practical information, a clear roadmap and understanding that you can take back to your shop. Huge thanks to Brian from Cherry Bekaert. Having your perspective as always in the room is a rare advantage for us and our community, and we greatly appreciate you sharing it with us. Paul, just always thank you for everything.
As always, yep.
As always, watch for your inbox for the recording, and we will be seeing you folks very, very soon. Have a wonderful Monday, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.